Can you send this letter? It's for Santa. Twin girls pleaded and asked the lonely rich rancher on Christmas morning. The first light of Christmas morning, 1882, broke cold and pale over the Wyoming territory. Snow blanketed the endless prairie in white silence, broken only by the dark spines of pine forests and the jagged teeth of distant mountains. The wind was a living thing out there, howling across the frozen earth with a voice that spoke of loneliness and vast, indifferent spaces. Two small figures moved through that whiteness like shadows. Twins, 7 years old, though you might have guessed younger from their size. Lily and Rose, identical in every way except their eyes. Lily's brown as creek stones, Rose's gray-blue as winter sky. They wore coats that had never been meant for a Wyoming winter, threadbare things passed down through too many orphan hands. Their boots were stuffed with newspaper to fill the extra space. Their mittens had holes. But clutched between them, protected in the inner pocket of Lily's coat, was a letter. Carefully folded, carried with reverence, touched and retouched until the paper was soft as cloth. They'd been walking all night. How much further? Lily's teeth chattered so hard she could barely form the words. Rose pointed ahead with a trembling hand. There. I can see the house. The Thornton Ranch sprawled across the valley floor like a kingdom unto itself. Even from a distance, its wealth was evident. Neat fences marching across the snow, multiple buildings arranged with military precision, and at the center, a grand house of timber and stone. 2 stories tall, with a wraparound porch and windows that caught the weak morning sun like eyes. But something about it felt wrong. Despite the smoke rising from its chimney, despite its obvious prosperity, the ranch felt abandoned. The corral stood empty. No horses stamped in the stables. The bunkhouse windows were dark as dead eyes. Only the main house showed any sign of life. What if he says no? Lily whispered. Like everyone else? Rose's jaw set with determination that looked strange on such a young face. He won't. He can't. It's Christmas, Lily. Even mean people are nice on Christmas. Mrs. Hendricks isn't. Rose had no answer for that. Mrs. Agatha Hendricks, matron of the Bitter Creek Orphan Asylum, had never been nice on Christmas or any other day. But they couldn't think about her now. They couldn't think about the punishment waiting for them when, if, they went back. They pressed on, their small bodies leaning into the wind. As they drew closer, the full scope of the Thornton Ranch revealed itself. This wasn't just a homestead, it was an empire. The main house alone was larger than the entire orphanage. Fine timber, imported glass, a stone chimney that spoke of serious money. The outbuildings were equally impressive. A barn that could house 50 horses, a smokehouse, a springhouse, storage sheds built solid enough to last 100 years. But that wrongness persisted. All this wealth, all this space, and it felt dead. Like a beautiful corpse dressed up for viewing. They climbed the front steps, their small feet leaving prints in the swept clean snow. A single wreath hung on the door, slightly crooked, looking more like an obligation than a celebration. The girls looked at each other. Years of twin-speak passed between them in a glance. Rose pulled the letter from Lily's coat and they held it between them like a talisman. Remember what we practiced? Rose whispered. Lily nodded. Be polite. Say please and thank you. Don't cry even if he yells. And if he says no, we try the next ranch. And the next. Until someone helps us. But there was no next ranch. They both knew it. The Thornton place was the last inhabited dwelling for 20 miles. If they were turned away here, they'd freeze before they made it anywhere else. This was their last chance. Rose raised her small fist and knocked. Inside the great room of the Thornton Ranch, James Thornton sat alone at a dining table built for 12. He was 45 years old but looked older, weathered by sun and wind and something deeper than weather. His face was all hard angles and harder expressions, gray eyes cold as frozen water. Despite the early hour, he wore an expensive suit, perfectly pressed as though he might have important business. He didn't. He just couldn't stand the informality of ranch clothes anymore. Couldn't stand anything that reminded him of the man he used to be. The room around him was a study in contradictions. Expensive furniture, fine rugs, a massive stone fireplace, all the trappings of wealth. But no warmth. Everything was too clean, too perfect, too untouched. Like a museum display of how rich people lived, not an actual home. A modest fire burned in the hearth. One wreath hung above the mantel, the only concession to Christmas. Next to it sat a small portrait frame, face down. It had been face down for 5 years. Thornton cut into his breakfast with mechanical precision. Steak and eggs, prepared yesterday by his housekeeper before she left to spend Christmas with her own family. He chewed without tasting, swallowed without pleasure, his eyes focused on nothing. A faint knock sounded at the door. He didn't react. Probably the wind. Or an animal blown against the porch. Another knock. Louder this time. His jaw tightened but he kept eating. "We're closed," he called out, not bothering to look up. "Come back after the holiday." His voice was rough from disuse. He spoke perhaps 20 words a day now, mostly to himself or his horse. Even that felt like too much. Knock. 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 Faster now, desperate. Thornton slammed down his knife and fork with enough force to make the china jump. Anger surged through him, not the hot kind, but the cold fury of a man whose carefully constructed isolation has been breached. He shoved back from the table and strode to the door, every line of his body radiating barely controlled rage. Who would dare disturb him on Christmas morning? Some townsperson with a plea for charity, probably. Or one of his ranch hands with some problem that couldn't wait. Well, they'd learn. Everyone learned, eventually, that James Thornton wanted to be left alone. He yanked open the door, a harsh dismissal already forming on his lips. He found himself looking down at two small girls. For a moment, time seemed to suspend itself. Thornton had been prepared for many things but not this. The girls stared up at him with enormous eyes, one pair brown, one pair gray-blue but otherwise identical. Identical button noses. Identical heart-shaped faces. Identical expressions of desperate hope mixed with bone-deep fear. They were tiny. Malnourished. Their coats were so thin he could see them shivering right through the fabric. One had a split lip, healing badly. The other favored one leg as if she twisted or sprained something. Between them, clutched in 4 small hands like something sacred, was a letter. "What are you doing here?" The harshness in his voice was automatic, a shield he'd built so carefully it deployed without thought. "Where are your parents?" The girls exchanged glances, a whole conversation happening in that wordless look. The one with brown eyes, slightly taller by perhaps half an inch, stepped forward. Something in her posture marked her as the braver twin, the protector. "Please, mister." Her voice shook but held determination underneath. "We're sorry to bother you, sir. But we need help. Can you send this letter?" She held it up like an offering. "It's for Santa Claus." Thornton stared at the letter. Then at them. Then past them at the vast white emptiness stretching to the horizon, unmarked by any tracks but theirs. "How did you get here?" "We walked, sir." This from the quieter twin, the one with gray-blue eyes. Her voice was soft but had steel underneath. "Walk? From where?" "Bitter Creek, sir." Thornton's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his stony expression. Bitter Creek was 15 miles away. 15 miles through snow and darkness and cold that could kill a grown man, let alone 2 children. "You walked 15 miles? In this weather? At night?" The girls nodded in unison, that eerie twin synchronization. Something flickered across Thornton's face. Not quite concern. Not yet. But something. He looked at them more carefully now, seeing past the cold and dirt to what lay beneath. The hollowness in their cheeks. The dark circles under their eyes. The way they held themselves, small, contained, ready to run or endure whatever came next. And the bruises. Old ones, faded to yellow-green but unmistakable. On Rosa's arm where her too short sleeve rode up. On Lily's wrist. The split lip that spoke of a recent blow. Thornton knew these signs. He'd seen them before on ranch hands fleeing bad situations. On women with carefully constructed excuses. On the few children who'd escaped the worst places. His jaw clenched. "Santa Claus doesn't exist," he said flatly. "It's a story adults tell children to make them behave. Go home." He started to close the door. Needed to close it. Needed these children gone before they cracked something open in him that had been frozen shut for 5 years. Rosa's small hand shot out and caught the door. Surprising strength in such a little thing. "We don't have a home to go to." Her voice was quiet but absolutely certain. Not anymore. The finality in those words, the resignation mixed with defiance, made Thornton stop. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something he recognized. The look of someone who'd given up on adults doing the right thing but couldn't quite stop hoping anyway. A gust of wind whipped across the porch, and both girls swayed slightly, exhausted beyond endurance. Rosa's lips had a bluish tinge. Early hypothermia. Thornton stood frozen in his doorway, torn between self-preservation and something he thought had died in him years ago. Every instinct screamed at him to close the door, to protect himself, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt him again. But he couldn't. He physically could not shut the door on 2 freezing children. Whatever else James Thornton had become in his years of isolation, he wasn't that far gone. Not yet. He stepped back with a heavy sigh. Come inside before you freeze to death on my porch. The girls didn't move. They stared at him, suspicious, waiting for the trick. Every adult in their short lives had taught them that kindness came with conditions, that nothing was free, that help always had a price. Now, Thornton said, gruffer this time. Before I change my mind. Lily grabbed Rose's hand and they stepped inside together, moving as one unit, never separated, always touching, always ready to protect each other. This too spoke volumes. These were children who'd learned they could only rely on each other. The warmth of the house hit them like a physical thing. Both girls swayed again, their bodies trying to process the sudden temperature change after a night in the cold. Thornton caught Rose's elbow as she stumbled, steadying her with surprising gentleness for such a harsh man. Take off your coats, he said, his voice awkward now, uncertain. He wasn't used to children. Wasn't used to anyone. Hang them by the fire. The girls didn't move. They'll dry faster if you take them off. These are our only coats, sir. Lily's voice was very small. If they get stolen. No one's going to steal them. There's no one here but me. Still they hesitated, trapped between the promise of warmth and the learned certainty that nothing good lasted, that anything given could be taken away just as quickly. Finally, Lily helped Rose out of her coat, then shrugged off her own. Underneath, they wore dresses that might have been nice once but were now patched and faded and too small. The kind of clothes that got passed down through a dozen children until they were more repair than original fabric. Thornton took the coats himself and hung them on hooks near the fire. The gentleness with which he handled these threadbare garments would have surprised anyone who knew him. But then no one really knew him anymore. Go sit down, he said, gesturing toward the great room. I'll bring you something warm. The girls perched on the edge of an ornate sofa upholstered in burgundy velvet, sitting so close together they were practically one person. Rose still clutched the letter as if it were the only solid thing in an uncertain world. Their eyes darted around the room, taking in the wealth, the space, the silence that felt heavy as snow. It's like a castle, Lily whispered. Bigger than the church in Bitter Creek, Rose whispered back. Their wonder was tinged with fear. This much wealth meant power, and power, in their experience, meant danger. Rich people could do whatever they wanted. Rich people didn't have to be kind. Thornton returned from the kitchen carrying 2 cups. He'd started to pour coffee, black the way he drank it, then remembered these were children and added generous amounts of milk and sugar. The way Sarah used to make it for Emma. The memory hit him so hard he had to stop in the doorway, close his eyes, breathe through it. 5 years and it could still blindside him like this. 5 years and he could still smell Sarah's perfume, still hear Emma's laugh, still feel the weight of their absence like a physical thing pressing on his chest. He forced himself to move, to set the cups on the low table in front of the sofa. Drink, he said, his voice rough. Then tell me where you came from and why you thought walking 15 miles in a blizzard was a good idea. The girls reached for the cups with trembling hands. Lily picked hers up, then immediately set it down with a small gasp, too hot to hold. Thornton watched this and, after a moment's hesitation, brought over 2 cloth napkins. Wrap these around the cups. Lily did, then helped Rose do the same. They sipped cautiously and the warmth hit their systems like a drug. Rose started crying, silent tears streaming down her face, her small body shaking with the effort of not making noise. She's not crying because she's sad, Lily said quickly, defensive. She's crying because she's warm. We haven't been warm in a long time. Something cracked in Thornton's chest. Not broke, he'd learned the difference. A crack was worse than a break. A crack meant the thing could still feel. He sat in the chair across from them, not too close, giving them space. His expensive suit felt ridiculous suddenly, sitting across from 2 half-starved children in their patched dresses. Tell me your names. I'm Lily, sir. This is Rose. We're twins if you couldn't tell. I could tell. How old are you? 7. Well, almost 7.5. Our birthday is April 14th, Rose added, her voice still thick with tears. And where do you live? The girls exchanged that look again. Silent twin communication refined over 7 years of needing only each other. We came from the Bitter Creek Orphan Asylum, Lily said carefully. Mrs. Agatha Hendricks is the matron. The way she said the name, with barely suppressed fear, with the careful enunciation of someone naming something dangerous, told Thornton everything he needed to know about Mrs. Hendricks. You ran away? We didn't run away, Lily said quickly. Too quickly. We just came to mail a letter. We're going to go back. Eventually. We just needed to send this first. She was lying but not well. Thornton could see it in the way her eyes slid away from his, In the protective way she shifted slightly in front of Rose, in the tremor in her voice that spoke of fear barely controlled. "What's so important about this letter?" Lily looked at Rose. Rose nodded permission, a tiny movement of her head. Lily held out the letter with both hands, formal as a ceremony, as if she were presenting something sacred. "It's for Santa Claus, sir. We heard, well, Betty Morrison, she's 12, she told us, that if you mail a letter to Santa before Christmas morning is over, he might still be able to grant your wish. Even if you didn't get it to him before Christmas Eve. Like a last chance. Mrs. Hendricks says Santa isn't real," Rose added quietly. "That he's just a story for stupid children. But Betty says he is real and he helps children who really, truly need it. And you thought I could mail this letter to the North Pole? Well, you're rich." Lily's voice took on a defensive edge. "Everyone in town says James Thornton is the richest man in 3 counties. Rich people can do anything. They can send telegrams across the whole country. They can order things from New York City and San Francisco. So why couldn't you send a letter to the North Pole?" The logic was childish but earnest, and Thornton found himself almost smiling despite everything. Almost. "Why didn't you ask someone in Bitter Creek? Why come all the way out here?" The girls' faces closed off like shutters slamming over windows. Lily's hand instinctively went to her split lip, touching it gently. "We tried," she said. "We asked Mr. Henderson at the general store. He told us to stop bothering him and get back to the orphanage. We asked Pastor Michaels at the church," Rose continued. "He said we should pray for our blessings instead of being greedy. We asked Mrs. Patterson who runs the boarding house." Lily's voice was very small now. "She said orphans don't deserve Christmas wishes." Thornton's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He knew these people. Did business with Henderson. Used to attend Pastor Michael's services back before. Had eaten meals at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house when business kept him in town overnight. They said that. His voice was controlled but rage burned underneath. "To 2 little girls on Christmas Eve?" "It's okay," Lily said quickly in the practiced tone of a child trying to defuse adult anger. "We're used to it. Nobody likes orphans much. We're expensive and we don't have families to speak for us and we eat food that could go to other children." She recited this like a lesson learned by rote, like something that had been drummed into her head over and over until she believed it as truth. "That's not true." Both girls flinched at the sharpness in his voice. Thornton forced himself to moderate his tone, but it was hard. So hard. "That's not true," he repeated, gentler this time. "Your children. Every child deserves to be cared for. To be fed. To be wanted." Rose looked at him with her gray-blue eyes, so like Sarah's eyes it hurt, and said with devastating simplicity, "But we're not wanted. If we were, someone would have adopted us by now." The truth of this statement hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Thornton was silent for a long moment. Then, "What does your letter say?" Lily and Rose looked at each other. This was clearly the moment they'd been both hoping for and dreading. Slowly, with the solemnity of a religious offering, Rose held out the letter. Thornton took it carefully. The paper was soft from being folded and refolded, smudged where small fingers had touched it over and over. He unfolded it with surprising gentleness for such a harsh man. The handwriting was childish but painstakingly neat. Every letter formed with great care. No crossed-out words, no mistakes. This had been copied from a draft, perfected, written with the desperate hope that presentation might make a difference. He began to read aloud, slowly, his rough voice making the simple words sound like poetry. "Dear Santa Claus, my name is Lily and my sister's name is Rose. We are 7 years old. We live at the Bitter Creek Orphan Asylum with Mrs. Hendricks." He paused, glancing at the girls. They were watching him with desperate intensity, as if his reaction to these words would determine their entire future. He continued, "We've been very good this year, even though Mrs. Hendricks says we haven't. We do all our chores. We don't talk back much. We help with the little children. Rose can read to them and I can sing them songs so they don't cry at night." His voice was rougher now. He cleared his throat and kept reading. "We don't want toys or candy or new dresses for Christmas. We don't want anything like that. We just want one thing. We want a family." The words blurred on the page. Thornton blinked hard, but his vision stayed blurry. He pushed on, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Someone who won't lock us in the cellar when we make mistakes. Someone who won't hit us with a wooden spoon when we're too slow with chores. Someone who won't tell us we're wicked and ungrateful and should be thankful for any roof over our heads." His hands trembled. Rose noticed and spoke up, urgent, "Keep reading, please." Thornton took a shaking breath and read on, "We just want someone who wants us. Someone who will let us sleep without being afraid. Someone who will say our names like they're happy we're there. Someone who will keep us warm and safe and together, because we're twins and we can't be separated ever. A tear dropped onto the paper, smudging the ink slightly. Thornton didn't wipe it away. Couldn't. That's all we want, Santa. Just someone to love us. We promise we'll be so good. We promise we'll work hard and never complain and we'll make them happy they chose us. Please, Santa. Please. We're running out of time. Love, Lily and Rose. P.S. We're sorry if this letter is too late. We tried to send it earlier but we couldn't. Silence filled the room. It stretched so long that Lily started to squirm nervously, her small body unable to stay still under the weight of it. Is it too much to ask for? Her voice was anxious, afraid. Betty said Santa can do miracles, but maybe a family is too big a miracle. Thornton carefully folded the letter closed. His hands shook so badly he had trouble making the creases line up properly. He set it on the table between them and stood abruptly, walking to the window, turning his back to them. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was fighting something, they could see it in every line of his body. I can't send this letter. Lily's face crumpled. She tried so hard to hold it together, to be brave like she'd been all night, but a small sob escaped anyway. Rose wrapped both arms around her sister and glared at Thornton's back with sudden, fierce hatred. You're just like everyone else, Rose said, her voice trembling with anger and betrayal. Betty was wrong. There's no magic. There's no Santa. There's no one who cares what happens to children like us. Thornton turned. Tears tracked down his weathered face, cutting through 5 years of carefully maintained emotional distance. I can't send it, he said gently, because Santa already received it. The girls stared at him, not understanding. The moment you wrote those words with true hearts, he knew. Santa doesn't need the post office. He hears every wish, every hope, every prayer from every child who really, truly needs him. Really? Lily's voice was caught between hope and skepticism, afraid to believe but unable to completely stop hoping. Really? Then where's our family? Rose challenged him, her small body rigid with defiance. It's Christmas morning. If he heard us, if he's going to help, wouldn't he have already? Thornton looked at these two small, fierce, damaged children. He thought of his own daughter, his Emma, who'd had that same challenging spirit, that same refusal to accept easy answers. He thought of Sarah, who'd believed the best of everyone and everything until the very end. And he thought of the 5 years he'd spent hiding from life, from connection, from any possibility of being hurt again. 5 years of existing but not living. 5 years of the ranch growing silent and empty around him, all this space and wealth and not a single person to share it with. Maybe this was why they were here. Maybe this was the answer both he and they had been looking for without knowing it. He knelt in front of them, getting down to eye level, making himself vulnerable in a way he hadn't allowed in years. Maybe he has, Thornton said carefully. Maybe that's why you walked 15 miles through the snow to my door. Maybe that's why I opened it instead of turning you away. Maybe Santa works through the people who need each other most. What do you mean? Lily asked, confused. I mean you must be hungry. Thornton stood, his decision made even if he didn't fully understand it yet. Let me get you some breakfast and we'll talk about what happens next. You're going to take us back, aren't you? Rose's voice was flat, resigned. Back to Mrs. Hendricks. Thornton looked at her, really looked at her. Saw the bruises, the fear, the resignation that came from expecting nothing good from adults. Saw a child who'd been hurt so many times she couldn't imagine a world where adults kept their promises. Is that what you want? He asked carefully. No. Both girls said it together, emphatic, their voices ringing with desperate certainty. Then we'll figure something else out. But first, food. When was the last time you ate? The girls looked at each other. Yesterday morning, Lily said. Breakfast was oatmeal, but Rose gave me half of hers because I was still hungry. Something in Thornton's chest twisted painfully. Right. Come with me to the kitchen. The kitchen was large and well-appointed, dominated by a massive cast-iron stove. Copper pots hung from hooks on the wall. The pantry door stood ajar, showing shelves stocked with provisions that could feed a family for months. The girls hovered in the doorway, uncertain, afraid to enter without explicit permission. Thornton went to the cold box and started pulling out food, bacon, eggs, butter, cream, bread. More food than two small girls could possibly eat, but something drove him to keep gathering it, as if abundance alone could somehow make up for the hunger they'd endured. Sit at the table, he said over his shoulder. They perched on chairs at the rough wooden work table. Not the formal dining table, This was where his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, took her meals. This was where Sarah used to sit and snap peas or peel apples while talking to him as he worked on ranch accounts, her voice filling the kitchen with warmth and laughter and life. That life felt impossibly distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Thornton started cooking with the efficiency of a man who'd been doing for himself for a while. The bacon sizzled in the pan, filling the kitchen with smell and sound. Behind him, he heard Rose's stomach growl audibly, heard her small gasp of embarrassment. "No need to be embarrassed," he said without turning around. "You're half-starved. Both of you are." He worked in silence for a few minutes, hyper-aware of the two small presences behind him. Then, keeping his eyes on the stove, he said, "Tell me about the orphanage. The truth this time, not the version you think an adult wants to hear." "It's not a nice place," Lily said carefully. "I gathered that. Be specific." There was a pause. Then Rose spoke, her voice steady despite the subject matter. "Mrs. Hendricks says she runs a Christian household and we should be grateful for God's provision. But she locks us in the cellar when we're too slow with chores, or when we talk during silent time, or when we have the devil in us. The cellar is dark and cold and there are rats," Lily added. "Once she left us there for 2 whole days because Rose broke a dish. It was an accident, but Mrs. Hendricks said carelessness is a sin." Thornton's knuckles went white where he gripped the spatula. 2 days? Without food. "She gave us water," Rose said matter-of-factly. "And she said fasting is good for the soul." "It's worse for some of the other children," Lily continued. "Tommy is only 4 and he still wets the bed sometimes. Mrs. Hendricks makes him sleep outside in the shed when he does. Even in winter. And Sarah, not us, there's another Sarah, she's 10, she talks back sometimes. Mrs. Hendricks says she has a rebellious spirit. She hits her with the wooden spoon until Sarah cries and apologizes." Thornton turned to face them, abandoning the stove. "Does she hit you?" "Not much," Lily said quickly. "Only when we deserve it. Children never deserve to be hit." His intensity frightened them a little. They shrank back in their chairs. "Never. Do you understand me?" They nodded, uncertain, not really understanding but afraid to argue. Thornton took a breath, controlled himself, turned back to the stove. His hands moved automatically, plating up generous portions. More food than the girls had probably seen on a plate in their entire lives. Thick slices of bacon. 3 eggs each. Buttered bread. Glasses of milk so full they threatened to slosh over. He set the plates in front of them. They stared. "Eat." They didn't move. "Go ahead," he said gentler. "All of it. There's more if you're still hungry." "This is all for us?" Lily whispered. "All for you." Lily picked up her fork, then set it down. "Aren't you going to pray first?" Thornton stiffened. He hadn't prayed in 5 years. Not since he'd knelt by Sarah and Emma's bedside and begged God to spare them, his prayers growing more desperate as their breathing grew shallower, until finally he was just sobbing and God wasn't listening and they died anyway. "You can say grace if you want," he said roughly. The girls bowed their heads. Lily spoke in a sing-song voice, words clearly memorized and repeated countless times. "For this food we are truly thankful. May we be worthy of God's generosity. May we remember the suffering of the poor and be grateful we are not among them. Amen." "Did Mrs. Hendricks teach you that?" Disgust colored Thornton's voice. "Yes, sir." "Forget it." He caught himself. Just eat." The girls ate. Not like children but like starving animals, shoveling food into their mouths, barely chewing, eating so fast they might choke. Thornton watched, his own appetite completely gone, something like horror growing in his chest. "Slow down," he said. "You'll make yourselves sick." They tried to slow down but couldn't. This might be their only good meal. This might be their last chance. Every instinct told them to eat as much as they could, as fast as they could, before someone changed their mind or the food disappeared or they woke up and found it was all a dream. Rose drank her milk too fast and started coughing, her small body convulsing. Lily pounded her back, alarmed. Thornton brought water, helped Rose drink it in small sips. "Listen to me." He sat at the table with them, making himself slow down, making his voice gentle. "There's more food. More than you could possibly eat. You don't have to eat like this. You're safe here." "For how long?" Rose asked between coughs. And there it was. The question that mattered. For how long? Thornton looked at these 2 small girls with their 2 thin faces and their careful manners layered over desperate hunger. He looked at the way they positioned themselves to always be touching, always be ready to protect each other. He looked at Lily's split lip and Rose's bruised arm and the wariness in their eyes that never quite went away, not even now, not even with food and warmth and gentle words. He thought about his empty house, his empty life, the 5 years he'd spent just existing rather than living. He thought about the letter to Santa, about the simple devastating wish for someone to love them and keep them safe. And he thought about Sarah's voice months before she died as they'd watched Emma play in the yard. "Promise me something, James. If I go first and don't argue, we both know it's possible. Promise me you won't let yourself die inside. Promise you'll keep living, keep loving, keep your heart open to the world." He promised, held her hand and promised through tears. And then she'd gotten sick and Emma had gotten sick and they died within a day of each other, and he'd broken that promise. Had closed himself off so completely that sometimes he wondered if he was even alive anymore or just going through the motions of living. "I don't know yet," he said slowly, carefully. "But I know you're not going back to that orphanage. Not today. Maybe not ever." The girls froze, food halfway to their mouths. "What?" Lily breathed. "I said you're not going back." But where will we go?" Rose asked, afraid to hope. Thornton looked around the kitchen, the house beyond. "I have 4 empty bedrooms upstairs. I have more food than one man could eat in a year. I have a ranch that's too quiet and too lonely and too full of ghosts." He met their eyes. Maybe you could stay here. For a while. Until we figure out what comes next." The girls stared at him. Hope warred with disbelief on their young faces, fought with fear and suspicion and the learned certainty that good things never lasted. "Really?" Lily's voice was so small it was barely audible. "Really? Why?" Rose asked, suspicious despite herself. "Why would you want us?" It was the question at the heart of everything. Why would anyone want 2 orphan girls, difficult and damaged and used to being told they were more trouble than they were worth? Thornton was silent for a long moment, considering. Then he gave them the truth because these children had already heard enough lies. "I don't know if I do. Yet." He saw them flinch and held up a hand. "I don't know anything about taking care of children. I don't know if I'd be any good at it. I've been alone for a long time. I've been angry and sad and shut off from the world." He paused, thinking hard about how to explain something he barely understood himself. "But I know you need help. I know you walked 15 miles through the snow because you were desperate enough to risk everything for a chance at something better. And I know that no child should have to beg for basic kindness." He looked at them steadily. "So maybe we help each other. Maybe you stay here and maybe I learn how to be alive again and maybe we see if it works." "And if it doesn't work?" Lily asked, practical despite everything. Thornton met her eyes. "Then we'll figure out something else. But I promise you this, I will never hurt you. I will never lock you up. I will never tell you you're worthless or unwanted. And I will never send you back to Mrs. Hendricks." Lily looked at Rose. Rose looked at Lily. Years of communication, of being each other's only family, passed between them in seconds. Some wordless understanding was reached. "Can we finish our breakfast?" Rose asked. Thornton blinked at the abrupt subject change, then realized. This was how they coped. They couldn't process the enormity of what he was offering, couldn't let themselves believe in something that might be taken away. So they retreated to the immediate, the concrete, the safe. Of course. The girls returned to their food, eating more slowly now, savoring each bite as if trying to memorize what real food tasted like. Thornton sat with them, his coffee cold in his hands, watching the winter sun climb higher outside the window. Somewhere in town, Mrs. Hendricks was probably raising the alarm. The marshal would come. There would be questions, complications, legal issues to sort through. But for now, in this kitchen, 2 small girls ate their first real meal in who knew how long. And a man who thought his heart had died 5 years ago felt it beating again, painful and uncertain and terrifying but unmistakably, undeniably alive. The letter to Santa sat on the table in the other room, its simple wish already granted in ways none of them yet understood. Sometimes miracles didn't look like magic. Sometimes they looked like 2 desperate children knocking on the right door at exactly the right time. Sometimes they looked like a broken man finding the courage to open that door. Sometimes they looked like this: a kitchen filled with morning light, the smell of bacon and coffee, and the sound of small voices beginning tentatively to hope. After breakfast, Thornton showed the girls around the ranch house. They followed him like small shadows, never more than a few feet apart, their eyes wide as they took in room after room of space and luxury they'd never imagined. The parlor with its fine furniture and oriental rugs. The library with floor-to-ceiling shelves of books, more books than existed in all of Bitter Creek. The dining room with its long table and crystal chandelier. Each room was immaculate, perfectly preserved, and utterly lifeless. "It's so quiet," Rose whispered to Lily. "Like a church." "Like a tomb," Lily whispered back, then clapped a hand over her mouth. afraid she'd said something wrong. But Thornton had heard. He paused at the base of the grand staircase, his hand on the carved newel post. "You're right," he said quietly. "It is like a tomb. I've kept it that way for 5 years." The girls didn't know what to say to that, so they said nothing. They'd learned early that silence was often safer than words. Thornton led them upstairs. The second floor was even grander than the first. Wide hallways with polished wood floors, tall windows that let in streams of winter light, doors leading to room after room. He stopped in front of one door. His hand rested on the knob but didn't turn it. The girls watched him struggle with something, saw his jaw clench and unclench, saw the way his breath came a little faster. "This was my daughter's room," he finally said. "Emma's room. She was about your age when—" He couldn't finish. Cleared his throat. Tried again. "When she died." The words hung in the air like smoke. "You can have this room if you want it. I'll have it cleaned up, get new things." "Can we see it first?" Lily asked softly. Thornton looked at her, surprised. Then he nodded and opened the door. The room beyond was frozen in time. A child's bed with a patchwork quilt. A rocking horse in the corner. Toys on shelves, dolls arranged in careful rows. A small desk by the window with paper and pencils still laid out, as if waiting for their owner to return. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, 5 years' worth of dust, undisturbed. The girls stepped inside reverently, as if entering a sacred space. Rose walked to the toys and touched them gently, her fingers leaving tracks in the dust. "She had so many," Rose breathed. "We've never— At the orphanage there's only 2 dolls for all the girls and they're falling apart." Lily went to the window and looked out at the vast ranch spread below. She could see everything from here. The whole world. Thornton stood in the doorway, unable to enter. He hadn't been in this room since the day after Emma's funeral, when he'd come in to, what? Say goodbye? Preserve her memory? He couldn't remember now. He only remembered standing exactly where he was standing now, looking at all these remnants of a life cut short, and feeling like his heart had been torn from his chest. "Whose was it?" Rose asked, pointing to a portrait on the wall, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding a baby on her lap. "That's my wife, Sarah. Emma's mother. And that's Emma as a baby." Rose studied the portrait intently. She had nice eyes. Like someone who would read you stories. "She did," Thornton said, his voice rough. "She read to Emma every night. Sometimes the same story 3 or 4 times because Emma loved it so much." "What happened to them?" Lily asked. Then, seeing Thornton's face, quickly added, "I'm sorry. We don't have to talk about it." "No, it's all right." Thornton leaned against the doorframe as if he needed it to hold him up. "It was scarlet fever. 5 years ago, almost to the day. It swept through the territory that winter. Emma caught it first. Then Sarah got it trying to nurse Emma back to health." He closed his eyes, seeing it all again. The fever-bright eyes. The red rash spreading across Emma's small body. Sarah's desperate attempts to cool the fever with wet cloths, rocking Emma through the night, singing to her even as her own fever climbed. The doctors he'd brought in from as far away as Denver, who could do nothing but shake their heads and offer condolences in advance. Emma died first. She was so small, so fragile. One morning she just stopped breathing. Sarah held her and screamed and wouldn't let her go. "We had to." He swallowed hard. "We had to pry Emma from her arms." The girls were silent, but their small hands had found each other, gripping tight. "Sarah died the next day. The doctor said it was the scarlet fever, but I think it was a broken heart. She said she couldn't stay in a world without our daughter. She looked at me and said, 'I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry.' And then she closed her eyes and she was gone." "Did you hold her?" Rose asked quietly. "Yes." "Good. Nobody should die alone." The simple wisdom of this, from a 7-year-old who'd seen too much of death and loneliness, nearly broke him. "No," Thornton agreed. "Nobody should." Lily was still looking at the toys, the books, the careful preservation of a life interrupted. "We'll take good care of it," she said suddenly. "The room, I mean. We'll take good care of Emma's things. We promise." "You don't have to." "We want to," Rose said firmly. "If she can't use them anymore, then they should be used by someone. Things get sad when nobody uses them. They forget what they're for." Thornton stared at this small girl with her gray-blue eyes so like Sarah's, speaking truths he'd been too grief-stricken to see. He'd kept this room as a shrine, thinking he was honoring Emma's memory. But maybe he'd just been keeping her ghost prisoner here, trapped in dust and silence. "All right," he said softly. "All right then. It's your room now. I'll get Mrs. Chin to help clean it up properly when she comes back. We can clean it, Lily said quickly. We know how. We do all the cleaning at the orphanage. You don't have to. We want to earn our keep, Rose interrupted. You're giving us food and a place to stay. We should work for it. Thornton looked at them, these two small girls already trying to prove their worth, already worried about being too much trouble. It made him angry and sad in equal measure. You don't have to earn anything, he said firmly. You're children. Children deserve to be cared for without having to work for it. That's what adults are supposed to do, take care of children. The girls looked at him skeptically as if he'd just said something in a foreign language. This was so far outside their experience that they literally couldn't comprehend it. Before Thornton could say anything else, they heard the sound of a wagon pulling up outside. Hoofbeats. Men's voices. All three of them tensed. The girls moved instinctively toward each other, their small bodies going rigid with fear. Thornton recognized that reaction, the trained response of children who expected every unexpected sound to mean trouble. Stay here, he said and went to the window. A wagon stood in the yard below and Marshal Cooper was climbing down from it. With him was another man, portly, well-dressed, officious-looking. Probably someone from the town council. Thornton's jaw tightened. So it was starting already. He'd known it would, but he'd hoped for more time. Who is it? Lily whispered, her face pale. The marshal. And someone from town. Are they going to take us back? Rose's voice was small and frightened. Thornton looked at their terrified faces and made a decision. Not if I have anything to say about it. Stay in this room. Don't come downstairs unless I call for you. Understand? They nodded, already backing toward the bed, making themselves small. Thornton went downstairs, his mind working fast. He needed to handle this carefully. The law was involved now, and Mrs. Hendricks would have rights as the orphanage matron. But damn it, he had rights too. This was his property. These were children who'd come to him seeking help. He opened the door before the marshal could knock. Cooper, he said by way of greeting. What brings you out here on Christmas morning? Marshal Cooper tipped his hat. He was a good man, Cooper, fair-minded, not given to quick judgments. They'd known each other for 20 years. Morning, James. Merry Christmas. This is Alderman Whitmore from the town council. Whitmore stepped forward, his expensive coat straining across his belly. Mr. Thornton. I apologize for the intrusion on this holy day, but we have urgent business. Mrs. Hendricks at the orphanage has reported 2 girls missing, twin girls, age 7. Last seen yesterday evening. She's quite distraught, as you can imagine. I'm sure she is, Thornton said dryly. You haven't seen them, have you? Cooper asked, though his eyes said he already knew the answer. Thornton could have lied. Could have sent them away, hidden the girls until they left. But he'd never been a liar, and he wasn't about to start now. They're here. Upstairs. Cooper's shoulders sagged slightly with relief. Thank God. When Mrs. Hendricks said they'd been missing all night in this weather, I thought. He didn't finish. They all knew what happened to children who spent a night in a Wyoming winter. I'll collect them and return them to Mrs. Hendricks immediately, Whitmore said briskly, moving toward the door. I'm sure they'll face appropriate discipline for this escapade, but... Thornton's hand shot out and caught the door frame, blocking Whitmore's entry. They're not going anywhere. Whitmore's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. I beg your pardon? I said they're not going back. Not to Mrs. Hendricks. Not to that orphanage. Mr. Thornton, Whitmore said in the tone of a man explaining something to a simpleton, I understand you may have some charitable impulses, but these are orphans. Wards of the county. They belong at the asylum. They belong wherever they're safe and cared for. That asylum isn't it. Cooper stepped forward. James, what's going on? What's going on, Thornton said, his voice hard as stone, is that those 2 little girls walked 15 miles through the snow last night because they were desperate. What's going on is that they're covered in bruises and half-starved and terrified. What's going on is that Mrs. Hendricks locks children in cellars and beats them with wooden spoons and tells them they're worthless. That's a serious accusation, Whitmore said coldly. It's the truth. Ask them yourself. Ask any of the children in that place. Mrs. Hendricks runs a strict household, Whitmore said. That's necessary when dealing with 23 unruly children. A firm hand is required. A firm hand, Thornton repeated, his voice dangerous. Is that what you call leaving a 7-year-old in a cellar for 2 days without food? What do you call making a 4-year-old sleep outside in winter because he wet the bed? Whitmore's face reddened. I don't know what stories these girls have told you, but children are known to exaggerate, especially orphans seeking attention. They're not lying. Thornton's voice could have cut glass. I've seen the bruises. Cooper held up his hands, trying to defuse the situation. James, I believe you. Hell, I've had my own concerns about that place for a long time. But legally, Mrs. Hendricks is their guardian. We can't just. Then I'll become their legal guardian. Both men stared at him. What? Cooper said. You heard me. I'll foster them. Adopt them if it comes to that. I have the means. I have the space. And I'm damn sure I can provide better care than that woman. Mr. Thornton, Whitmore said carefully, with all due respect, you're a single man. You have no experience with children. You live alone on an isolated ranch. The courts would never approve such an arrangement. Then the courts can come tell me that to my face. Thornton's jaw set with determination. Those girls are staying here. If Mrs. Hendricks wants them back, she can send the sheriff with a warrant. Until then, they're under my protection. This is highly irregular, Whitmore blustered. The town council will hear about this. There will be an inquiry. Let there be an inquiry. Let the town council ask why they've been funding an orphanage where children are abused. Let them explain why no one has checked on those children's welfare in years. Whitmore's face went from red to purple. Are you threatening the town council? I'm stating facts. Now get off my property. James, Cooper said quietly, you know I have to report this. There will be legal proceedings. Mrs. Hendricks has rights. So do those children. They have the right to be safe, to be fed, to not live in constant fear. When did we forget that? Cooper was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. He turned to Whitmore. I'll file a report stating that the children are safe and in good care. The rest can be sorted out after the holiday. Marshal Cooper, I must protest. And I must insist, Cooper said firmly, that on Christmas Day, we be grateful 2 children are safe and warm instead of frozen to death in a snowbank. The legal issues can wait 24 hours. Whitmore sputtered, but Cooper was already turning back to Thornton. Can I see them? Just to verify they're unharmed. Thornton hesitated, then nodded. Wait here. He went upstairs and found the girls exactly where he'd left them, huddled together on the bed, their faces tight with fear. Is Mrs. Hendricks here? Lily whispered. No. Just the marshal. He wants to see that you're all right. He's a good man, you can trust him. But trust was not something these girls gave easily. They came downstairs slowly, clinging to each other, their small bodies tense and ready to run. Cooper took one look at them and his expression softened. He knelt down to their level, making himself less threatening. Hello, girls. I'm Marshal Cooper. You're not in any trouble, I promise. I just want to make sure you're okay. The girls said nothing, watching him with wary eyes. Are you being treated well here? They looked at Thornton as if checking whether it was safe to answer. He nodded encouragingly. Yes, sir, Lily said quietly. Has Mr. Thornton hurt you in any way? No, sir. He gave us breakfast. Real breakfast with bacon and eggs and milk. Cooper's mouth tightened as he realized the significance of the word real. He stood and turned to Thornton. I'll do what I can to delay any proceedings. Give you time to get things sorted legally. But James. He lowered his voice. You need to be sure about this. Taking in 2 children, especially after. He didn't finish, but they both knew what he meant. After Sarah and Emma. I'm sure, Thornton said, surprising himself with how true it was. Cooper studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right. I'll tell Mrs. Hendricks the girls are safe and that there will be a formal hearing to determine custody. That should buy you a few days at least. Thank you, Cooper. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get complicated. Mrs. Hendricks won't give up 23 children without a fight. It's how she makes her living running that place. And the town council won't want the scandal of an abuse investigation. Let them fight. I'm not backing down. Cooper smiled slightly. I believe you. Merry Christmas, James. Girls. He tipped his hat and left, dragging a protesting Whitmore with him. Thornton closed the door and turned to find both girls staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. You really meant it, Rose said slowly. About us staying. I meant it. Even though it's going to be complicated? Even though. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Nobody's ever fought for us before. Thornton felt that crack in his chest widen a little more. He knelt down, bringing himself to their level. Well, someone's fighting for you now. And I don't lose fights very often. What if you do? Rose asked practically. What if they make us go back? Then I'll appeal. I'll hire lawyers. I'll take it to the territorial governor if I have to. He met their eyes steadily. I made you a promise. I don't break my promises. The girls looked at each other in that silent twin way. Some decision was made. Then simultaneously they stepped forward and wrapped their small arms around him. Thornton froze for a heartbeat, uncertain. Then his arms came up and encircled them both, holding them carefully as if they might break. They stood like that for a long moment, a broken man and two damaged children, finding in each other something they'd all thought was lost forever. Oh. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a strange, tentative dance of learning each other. Thornton showed the girls the rest of the ranch, the barn with its empty stalls. I let most of the horses go after. Kept just a few, the henhouse where chickens scratched in the snow, the smokehouse with its hanging meat. The girls were fascinated by everything, asking endless questions. How many acres was the ranch? 5,000. How many cattle? Used to be 2,000 head, now closer to 500. Why did he have so much land if he lived alone? A question Thornton couldn't quite answer. For lunch, Thornton made sandwiches, thick slices of bread with cold roast beef and cheese. The girls ate with more restraint this time, but he could see them eyeing the extra food on the counter, calculating how much they could eat without seeming greedy. Take as much as you want, he said quietly. There's plenty. After lunch, they cleaned Emma's room together. Thornton brought up buckets of warm water, clean rags, fresh linens. The girls worked with the efficiency of children who'd done endless chores, but there was a gentleness to how they handled Emma's things. They didn't treat them as just objects to be cleaned and moved. They treated them with reverence. This one's pretty, Rose said, holding up a china doll with real hair and a painted face. Emma must have loved her. She did. Her name is Molly. Sarah bought her for Emma's 5th birthday. Can we play with her? Lily asked hesitantly. Of course. That's what dolls are for. But the girls set Molly carefully back on the shelf, as if they weren't quite ready to claim that privilege yet. As the afternoon wore on, Thornton found himself watching them more than working. The way Lily hummed while she dusted. The way Rose organized the books on the shelf by size, creating a pleasing pattern. The way they moved around each other with unconscious coordination, anticipating each other's needs without speaking. He'd forgotten what it was like to have life in this house. The sound of voices. The creak of floorboards under small feet. The sense that someone else existed in the world besides himself. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. That evening, as the winter sun sank low and cast long shadows across the snow, Thornton found the girls standing at the window of what was now their room, looking out at the darkening landscape. What are you thinking about? He asked from the doorway. The other children, Lily said without turning around. At the orphanage. They're probably having bread and water for Christmas dinner. Mrs. Hendricks says anything more is a waste on ungrateful children. Tommy will cry, Rose added softly. He always cries on Christmas. He's so little, he doesn't understand why nobody wants him. Thornton felt something twist in his chest. I can't save all of them, he said quietly. I wish I could, but I can't. We know, Lily said. But maybe if you take care of us, if we turn out okay, then other people will want to adopt orphans too. Maybe we can be like proof that it works. The simple hope in her voice, that their suffering might somehow help others, humbled him completely. Maybe, he agreed. Maybe you can be exactly that. Dinner was a quiet affair. Thornton heated up leftover stew and they ate at the kitchen table, the informal one, all three of them. It felt more right than the formal dining room with its echoing emptiness. After dinner, Lily asked if she could play the piano. Thornton hesitated. He hadn't heard music in this house in 5 years, but he nodded. She played Silent Night from memory, her small fingers hesitant on the keys, hitting wrong notes but continuing on with determination. Rose stood beside her and sang in a clear, pure voice that filled the house with something it had been missing for too long. Beauty. Thornton stood in the doorway listening, and for the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel like he was drowning. He felt like maybe, possibly, he might be learning how to swim again. When the song ended, he walked to the mantel and picked up the portrait that had been face down for so long. Sarah and Emma smiled out at him from the frame, forever frozen in a moment of happiness. I want you to know about them, he said to the girls. About Sarah and Emma. Will you let me tell you? They nodded solemnly and came to sit by the fire. Thornton sat with them, not in his chair but down on their level on the floor like they were. And he talked. About Sarah's laugh, how it sounded like music. About Emma's stubborn streak, how she would argue about going to bed until she fell asleep mid-argument. About Sunday dinners and summer picnics and the 1,000 small moments that made up a life together. He talked until his voice was hoarse, and the girls listened without interrupting, understanding somehow that this was important. That these stories needed to be told, these memories needed to be honored. When he finally fell silent, Rose reached out and touched the portrait gently. "They sound wonderful," she said. "They were. Do you think?" Lily hesitated. "Do you think they would mind us being here? Using Emma's room?" Thornton considered this seriously. "No," he said finally. "Sarah always said this house was meant to be filled with life and love. She'd be happy that it is again. Emma would probably be excited to have sisters." "Sisters." Rose breathed the word like a prayer. "Well, that's what you'd be. This works out. If the courts agree, you'd be my daughters. And Emma would still be my daughter too, even though she's gone. So that would make you all sisters." The girls looked at each other with shining eyes. "We've never had a family before," Lily said. "Not a real one. Just each other." "Now you have me too," Thornton said. "For better or worse. And I have you. I think maybe we were all meant to find each other. Maybe that letter really did reach Santa, and this was his answer." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth. 3 people sat together in the warm light, a broken man and 2 damaged children, beginning the long, uncertain process of healing each other. It wouldn't be easy. There would be legal battles ahead. There would be moments of doubt and fear and memories that hurt too much to bear. There would be times when Thornton would wonder if he was doing the right thing, when the girls would worry they were too much trouble, when all of them would be tempted to retreat back into their protective shells. But for tonight, on this Christmas night, they were together. They were warm. They were safe. And that was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything. The days following Christmas passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Thornton found himself relearning how to live, not just exist but actually live. The house woke up with him now, filled with the sounds of small feet on stairs, whispered conversations between twins, the occasional burst of laughter quickly stifled as if joy were something to be hidden. Mrs. Chin returned 2 days after Christmas and stopped dead in the doorway of the kitchen, her market basket nearly falling from her hands. "Mr. Thornton," she said carefully, staring at the 2 small girls sitting at the table eating oatmeal, "you have visitors?" "Residents," Thornton corrected. "Mrs. Chen, these are Lily and Rose. They'll be living here from now on. Girls, this is Mrs. Chen. She helps keep the house running." Mrs. Chen, who'd worked for the Thorntons since before Emma was born, studied the girls with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Not the too thin faces, not the healing bruises, not the way they sat poised to flee at any moment. "Living here," she repeated. Then her face softened into the first genuine smile Thornton had seen from her in 5 years. "Well then, we have much work to do. These girls need proper clothes, proper meals. And someone needs to teach them they don't have to ask permission to breathe in this house." "We're very grateful to be here, ma'am," Lily said quickly, in that practiced voice of a child trying to be no trouble. "Grateful is good. Terrified is not necessary." Mrs. Chin set down her basket and rolled up her sleeves. "You, Mr. Thornton, out of my kitchen. I need to feed these children properly. You girls come help me. We'll make cookies while we talk." Thornton found himself gently but firmly evicted from his own kitchen. Through the doorway, he could hear Mrs. Chen's voice, matter-of-fact and kind, asking questions and receiving hesitant answers. By the time he returned an hour later, the kitchen smelled like sugar and vanilla, and both girls had flour on their noses and something like relaxation in their shoulders. "Mrs. Chen says we can make cookies whenever we want," Rose told him, her eyes wide with wonder. "As many as we want." "Within reason," Mrs. Chen amended, but she was smiling. Later, when the girls were out of earshot, she pulled Thornton aside. "Those children have been through hell," she said bluntly. "I've seen their scars. Not just the bruises, the scars underneath. The ones that don't show." "I know." "Good. Then you know this won't be easy. They'll test you. They'll push boundaries to see if you'll send them away like everyone else. They'll hoard food even when there's plenty. They'll wake up screaming from nightmares. They'll lie about little things because lying kept them safe before." "I can handle it." Mrs. Chin studied his face for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally. "I think maybe you can. You're different than you were. Still broken, but broken in a way that's healing instead of rotting." It was perhaps the most profound thing anyone had said to him in 5 years. The legal proceedings began the following week. Marshall Cooper brought the papers himself, apologetic but firm. There would be a hearing in 2 weeks before Judge Morrison. Mrs. Hendricks was demanding the return of her charges. The town council wanted the matter resolved quickly and quietly. "They're afraid," Cooper explained, sitting in Thornton's study while the girls practiced their letters in the next room. Afraid of what an investigation might reveal. Afraid of the cost if they have to reform the whole orphanage system. Afraid of scandal. Good, Thornton said coldly. They should be afraid. James, you need to understand what you're up against. Mrs. Hendricks has run that orphanage for 15 years. She has supporters in town, people who believe in strict discipline who think orphans need firm handling. And you, no offense, but you've been a hermit for 5 years. You have no wife, no experience with children. The judge might see you as an eccentric rich man having a momentary charitable impulse. Then I'll prove I'm not. How? Thornton was silent for a moment. Then, I'll show them what those girls need. What any child needs. Safety. Stability. Well, I'll show them that I can provide that. Cooper sighed. I hope you're right. Because if you lose, those girls go back to Mrs. Hendricks. And she'll make their lives hell for causing trouble. After Cooper left, Thornton sat in his study for a long time, staring at the papers. The reality of what he'd taken on pressed down on him like a physical weight. What if he did lose? What if he wasn't enough? What if his grief and isolation had broken him too badly to be a proper father? A soft knock on the door interrupted his spiral of doubt. Come in. Rose entered, carrying a piece of paper. I wrote something, she said shyly. For you. Thornton took the paper. In careful, childish handwriting she'd written. Dear Mr. Thornton, thank you for letting us stay. Thank you for the food and the warm bed and for not being mean. Thank you for fighting for us even though it's hard. We will try to be very good so you won't regret it. Love, Rose and Lily. Below the words they'd drawn a picture, 3 stick figures holding hands. One tall, 2 small. A house with a heart on it. A sun shining overhead despite the winter outside. Thornton stared at this simple drawing until his vision blurred. When he looked up, Rose was watching him anxiously. Do you like it? I love it, he said, his voice rough. Thank you, Rose. I'll keep this forever. She beamed, then hesitated. Are you scared? About the judge? He could have lied. Could have told her everything would be fine, not to worry. But these girls had been lied to enough. Yes, he admitted. I'm scared. Scared I might fail you. Scared the judge might not think I'm fit to be your guardian. You won't fail us, Rose said with absolute certainty. You already saved us. That's more than anyone else ever did. After she left, Thornton pinned the drawing to the wall of his study, right next to the portrait of Sarah and Emma. 3 families, past, present, and hoped for future, all watching over each other. The days before the hearing were filled with preparation. Thornton hired a lawyer, Charles Brennan, the best in the territory, a man who'd argued cases all the way to the territorial Supreme Court. Brennan came to the ranch, interviewed the girls, examined the documentation, and shook his head. It's not ideal, he said bluntly. You're a single man, somewhat reclusive, with no prior experience. Mrs. Hendricks, despite her methods, has years of experience running an institution. The burden of proof is on us to show she's unfit and you're better suited. So we show that. Oh. The girl's word against hers won't be enough. We need evidence. Then we get evidence. But evidence proved difficult to obtain. None of the other orphans would speak against Mrs. Hendricks. They were too terrified. The townspeople who dealt with the orphanage mostly shrugged and said things like, children exaggerate, or, discipline is necessary, or better than letting them run wild in the streets. It was Marshal Cooper who finally provided a breakthrough. He'd been doing his own quiet investigation, talking to former orphanage workers, doctors who'd treated children from there, suppliers who'd sold goods to Mrs. Hendricks. I found something, he said, riding out to the ranch 3 days before the hearing. Dr. Patterson, he's retired now, lives in Cheyenne, he kept records. Every time he was called to the orphanage, he documented what he saw. Broken bones, burns, malnutrition. He reported it to the town council 5 years ago, but they buried it. Told him to mind his own business. Will he testify? He will. I sent him a telegram. He's catching the train tomorrow. Thornton felt the first real spark of hope since this began. Thank you, Cooper. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Mrs. Hendricks won't go down without a fight. And she has friends, people who profit from keeping that orphanage running as cheaply as possible. They'll come at you hard. Let them come. The night before the hearing, Thornton couldn't sleep. He paced his study, going over everything Brennan had told him, every possible question the judge might ask, every argument Mrs. Hendricks might make. Near midnight he heard a soft sound in the hallway. Opening his door he found both girls standing there in their nightgowns, holding hands, looking uncertain. We couldn't sleep, Lily whispered. Neither could I, Thornton admitted. Are you worried about tomorrow? Yes. Us too. He looked at their small faces, saw the fear there, and made a decision. Come on. He led them downstairs to the kitchen, lit lamps, and pulled out milk and cookies, the ones they'd made with Mrs. Chen. They sat at the table together, and for a while no one spoke. Just sat in companionable silence, eating cookies, listening to the wind outside. Can I tell you something? Rose said finally. Of course. We've been scared every day of our lives. Every single day since we were old enough to understand that we were different, that we weren't wanted. Scared that we'd be separated. Scared that we'd get sent somewhere worse. Scared that we'd grow up and still be alone. But we're not scared here, Lily continued. Not of you. You make us feel safe. Even if tomorrow goes badly, even if we have to leave, we'll always remember that for a little while, we knew what it felt like to have a home. Thornton's throat tightened. You're not leaving. I won't let them take you. You can't promise that, Rose said gently. The judge might say you have to. Then I'll appeal. I'll fight it all the way to Washington if I have to. Why? Lily asked. Why would you do that for us? You barely know us. It was a fair question. Thornton thought about his answer carefully. Because, he said finally, 5 years ago I lost my family. I thought that was the end of love in my life. I thought I'd never care about anyone again, never let anyone close enough to hurt me. I built walls so high and thick that nothing could get through. He looked at them steadily. And then 2 little girls knocked on my door on Christmas morning with a letter for Santa. And somehow, despite all my walls, you got through. You reminded me what it feels like to care about someone other than myself. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You gave me back my life. So you saved us, but we saved you too? Rose asked. Exactly. That's very neat, Lily said seriously. Like in a story. Maybe it is a story. Maybe it's the story we all needed. They finished their cookies in silence. Then Thornton walked them back upstairs, tucked them into bed, an action that still felt foreign but was becoming more natural, and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them settle under the quilts. Mr. Thornton? Rose called softly. Yes. Can we call you Papa yet? Or is it still too soon? His breath caught. You can call me whatever feels right to you. Papa feels right, Lily said. If that's okay. It's more than okay. Good night, Papa, they said in unison. Good night, daughters. He closed the door softly and leaned against it, overwhelmed by the simple enormity of those words. Daughters. His daughters. Not to replace Emma, nothing could ever do that. But to add to his heart, to expand his capacity for love rather than replace one love with another. In his study he looked at the drawing on his wall, 3 stick figures holding hands. He'd been alone for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than himself. Tomorrow he'd fight for the right to keep being part of it. The courthouse in Bitter Creek was packed. Word had spread about the hearing, and it seemed like half the county had turned out to watch. Thornton arrived early with the girls, dressed in their best dresses. New ones Mrs. Chen had helped them make from fabric ordered from Denver. They looked like different children from the half-frozen waifs who'd appeared on his doorstep 2 weeks ago. Their faces had filled out slightly. The fear in their eyes had lessened, though it hadn't disappeared entirely. Mrs. Hendricks was already there, sitting ramrod straight in her severe black dress, her face pinched and disapproving. She was a tall woman, thin to the point of gauntness, with iron-gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. When she saw the girls, her eyes narrowed. Lily. Rose. You'll return to the asylum immediately after this farce concludes. And we'll discuss your punishment for running away. Both girls shrank back. Thornton stepped between them and Mrs. Hendricks. You won't speak to them, he said quietly but with unmistakable menace. Not now. Not ever again if I have anything to say about it. Mr. Thornton, Mrs. Hendricks said with icy disdain, these are children under my care. I have both the legal right and the moral obligation to discipline them. You have the legal right to abuse children? Interesting interpretation of the law. Mrs. Hendricks' face reddened. How dare you? All rise for the Honorable Judge Morrison, the bailiff called, cutting off her response. Judge Morrison was an old man, perhaps 70, with a shock of white hair and shrewd eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He'd been a judge in Wyoming Territory for 30 years, had seen every kind of case imaginable. His reputation was for fairness but also for strict adherence to law over sentiment. Be seated, he said, settling into his chair. This is a hearing to determine custody of two minor children, Lily and Rose, currently wards of the Bitter Creek Orphan Asylum. Mrs. Agatha Hendricks is petitioning for their return. Mr. James Thornton is petitioning for custody. Mr. Brennan, you represent Mr. Thornton? Yes, Your Honor. And Mrs. Hendricks, you're representing yourself? I am, Your Honor. This matter is simple enough that I don't require legal counsel. These girls are orphans in my care. They ran away, a clear disciplinary issue, and Mr. Thornton, however well-intentioned, has no legal right to keep them. Mr. Brennan? Brennan stood. Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Hendricks is unfit to care for these children. We have evidence of systematic abuse and neglect at the orphanage, and we're requesting that custody be awarded to Mr. Thornton, who has demonstrated both the means and the commitment to provide proper care. Strong accusations, Judge Morrison said. I hope you can back them up. Mrs. Hendricks, you may present your case first. Mrs. Hendricks stood, her bearing as rigid as her morals. For the next hour she painted a picture of the orphanage as a haven for unfortunate children, herself as a dedicated servant of God, and the girls as troubled, disobedient children prone to fantasy and lies. These are difficult children, Your Honor, she said. Twins are always trouble, too dependent on each other, resistant to proper authority. I've done my best to instill discipline and godliness in them, but they fight me at every turn. They lie. They steal. They incite the other children to rebellion. When I attempt to correct them, as is both my right and my duty, they claim abuse. What form does this correction take? Judge Morrison asked. Standard disciplinary measures. Time and quiet reflection when they're unruly. Reduction of privileges when they're disobedient. Occasionally, when necessary, corporal punishment, a wooden spoon on the hand, nothing more. The same discipline any good Christian parent would employ. And the cellar? Brennan interjected. You lock children in the cellar for days at a time? The cellar is used for quiet reflection, not punishment. And only for a few hours, not days. The children exaggerate because they don't like discipline. I see. And the food? The witnesses we've spoken to say the children are often hungry. We provide adequate nutrition on a limited budget. Orphans must learn that resources are precious and waste is sinful. They get 3 meals a day, which is more than many children in this territory can say. She sat down, satisfied. Several townspeople spoke in her support. Alderman Whitmore, who emphasized the financial burden of the orphanage on the town. Pastor Michaels, who praised Mrs. Hendricks' godly devotion. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, who said she'd never heard of any abuse. Then it was Brennan's turn. He called Marshall Cooper first, who testified about finding the girls on Thornton's doorstep, half frozen and terrified. He described their condition, the bruises, the split lip, the way they flinched from any sudden movement. In your professional opinion, Marshall Cooper, having served in law enforcement for 20 years, did these children appear to have been abused? Yes. Without question. Objection. Mrs. Hendricks rose. Marshall Cooper is not a medical professional. His opinion is meaningless. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. But his observations as a peace officer are on the record. Continue, Mr. Brennan. Brennan called Dr. Patterson next. The retired doctor took the stand with a folder full of yellowed papers, 5 years' worth of medical records from his time as the orphanage physician. Dr. Patterson, how many times were you called to the orphanage to treat children? 47 times over the course of 5 years. And what did you observe? Dr. Patterson opened his folder. Broken fingers, broken toes, 1 broken arm, burns from hot water, rope burns on wrists and ankles, severe malnutrition, infections from untreated wounds, frostbite, welts and bruises consistent with being struck repeatedly with a hard object. His voice was calm but damning. I documented everything. I reported it to the town council 5 years ago. They chose to do nothing. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Order. Mr. Whitmore, is this true? Whitmore looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. The council reviewed Dr. Patterson's concerns and determined that they were exaggerated, that he was misinterpreting normal childhood injuries. 47 documented cases of injury in 5 years, all from one institution with 23 children? Dr. Patterson's voice was cutting. That's 1 significant injury every 6 weeks. In what world is that normal? Did you witness Mrs. Hendricks inflicting any of these injuries? Mrs. Hendricks demanded. No. But children don't break their own bones. They don't burn themselves repeatedly. They don't starve themselves. Finally, Brennan called the girls. Thornton wanted to spare them this, but Brennan had been firm. The judge needed to hear directly from them. Lily went first. She sat in the witness chair, her small hands folded in her lap, looking impossibly tiny and young. Brennan was gentle with his questions, but there was no gentle way to ask a child to describe her own abuse. Lily, can you tell the judge about your life at the orphanage? It was hard. Her voice was barely audible. We were always hungry, always cold, always afraid. Afraid of what? Of Mrs. Hendricks. Of making mistakes. Of being sent to the cellar. Can you describe the cellar? Lily's hands clenched. It's dark. So dark you can't see anything. And cold. There's no light, no heat. Just darkness and rats and the smell of earth. Sometimes you can hear the other children above you, but they can't help you. Nobody can help you when you're in the cellar. How long would Mrs. Hendricks leave you there? It depended on what we did wrong. Sometimes just a few hours. Once. Her voice broke. Once she left us there for 2 whole days and nights because Rose broke a dish by accident. We couldn't see. Couldn't move. Just had to sit in the dark and wait. What did you think about during those 2 days? I thought about dying. I thought maybe it would be easier to just die than to keep being so afraid all the time. The courtroom was silent. Even Mrs. Hendricks had gone pale. Rose's testimony was similar but somehow more damning in its matter-of-fact delivery. She described the wooden spoon beatings, the meals withheld as punishment, the 4-year-old forced to sleep outside in winter. She named names, specific children, specific injuries, specific incidents. And why did you run away on Christmas Eve? Brennan asked. Because we couldn't take it anymore, Rose said simply. Because we wrote a letter to Santa asking for a family and we thought if we could just mail it, if we could just get it to someone who cared, maybe something would change. We didn't know where else to go. We just knew we couldn't stay there anymore. And when you got to Mr. Thornton's ranch? He let us in. He fed us. He gave us warm beds and clean clothes and told us we were safe. Rose looked directly at Judge Morrison. For the first time in our whole lives we felt safe. Please don't make us go back. Please. Mrs. Hendricks tried to cross-examine, to poke holes in their stories, to suggest they were lying or exaggerating. But her questions had the opposite effect. The more she tried to minimize what they'd experienced, the worse she looked. Finally, Brennan called his last witness, James Thornton. Thornton took the stand, aware of every eye in the courtroom on him. For 5 years he'd hidden from the world. Now the world was watching him try to prove he was fit to be a father again. Mr. Thornton, Brennan began, why do you want custody of these children? It was the question he'd been asking himself for 2 weeks. The answer came easier than he expected. Because they need someone and I need them. Because I've spent 5 years being half alive, going through the motions of living without any real purpose. Because 2 small girls knocked on my door on Christmas morning and reminded me what it feels like to care about someone other than myself. He paused. Because I failed my own daughter. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can save these 2. And maybe in saving them I can save myself. You're a single man. You have no experience raising children. What makes you think you can provide adequate care? I have a large ranch, substantial means, and the ability to hire help as needed. Mrs. Chin, who worked for my family for years, has agreed to stay on and help with the girls. I can provide education, stability, safety, everything children need to thrive. He looked at the girls. But more than that, I can provide love. I can provide a home where they don't have to be afraid. Where they can be children instead of prisoners. Mrs. Hendricks stood. Your Honor, may I question the witness? Proceed. She approached Thornton with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Thornton, you lost your wife and daughter 5 years ago, correct? Yes. Tragic. And since then you've lived alone, seen almost no one, become something of a hermit. Would you say that's the behavior of a stable, mentally sound individual? I would say that's the behavior of someone grieving. Grieving for 5 years? That seems excessive. There's no timeline on grief, Mrs. Hendricks. No, but there is a timeline on proper mental health. You shut yourself away from the world. You abandoned your social obligations. You stopped attending church, stopped participating in the community. And now, suddenly, you want to take on 2 children? Forgive me, but this seems less like genuine care and more like a grief-stricken man grasping at a replacement for the family he lost. The accusation hit harder than Thornton wanted to admit. Because wasn't there some truth to it? Hadn't he, at least initially, been drawn to these girls partly because they reminded him of what he'd lost? But then he looked at Lily and Rose, sitting beside Marshall Cooper, watching him with those trusting eyes. And he knew, this wasn't about replacement. This was about addition. Expansion. learning that the heart could hold more than one love at a time. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "I'm not trying to replace Emma and Sarah. Nothing could replace them. But these girls aren't replacements. They're their own people with their own needs, their own futures. And yes, maybe initially I helped them partly because I was lonely, because I saw a chance to matter to someone again. But now I want custody because I've spent 2 weeks with them and I can't imagine my life without them. Because they laugh at my terrible cooking and ask endless questions about the ranch and make the house feel like a home again. Because when Rose calls me Papa, I feel something I haven't felt in 5 years, hope." The courtroom was silent. Mrs. Hendricks had no response to that. Judge Morrison called for a brief recess. Thornton joined the girls, who immediately grabbed his hands. "You did good, Papa," Lily whispered. "We'll see." But inside he wasn't sure. The judge's face had been unreadable throughout the proceedings. When they reconvened, Judge Morrison looked grave. "This has been one of the most troubling cases I've encountered in my 30 years on the bench," he began. "On one hand, we have Mrs. Hendricks, who has run the orphanage for 15 years and has the legal authority to care for these children. On the other hand, we have evidence, substantial, documented evidence, of systemic abuse and neglect." He looked at Mrs. Hendricks. "Madam, I find Dr. Patterson's testimony credible and damning. The medical records alone paint a picture of an institution where children are regularly harmed. Whether through deliberate abuse or gross negligence, the result is the same: children suffering under your care. Your Honor, I'm not finished. I'm also deeply troubled by the town council's apparent knowledge of these conditions and their failure to act. That's a separate matter that will be addressed." He turned to Thornton. "Mr. Thornton, I appreciate your honesty about your own struggles. Grief is not a disqualification for parenthood. If it were, half the families in this territory would be dissolved. However, taking on 2 children is a significant responsibility, especially for a man with no recent experience." Thornton's heart sank. He was going to rule against him. "That said," Judge Morrison continued, "I've also seen the change in these children in just 2 weeks. They're healthier, happier, more confident. They clearly feel safe with you. And most importantly, they want to be with you. The law gives me discretion to consider the children's wishes, particularly when the alternative placement has been shown to be harmful." He looked at the girls. "Lily, Rose, if I give Mr. Thornton custody, you understand that means he'll be your guardian? He'll make decisions for you, discipline you when necessary, expect you to follow his rules." Both girls nodded vigorously. "And you want that? You want to live with him?" "Yes, Your Honor," they said in unison. "Please." Judge Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then, "Very well. I hereby remove Lily and Rose from the custody of Mrs. Hendricks and the Bitter Creek Orphan Asylum. Temporary custody is awarded to James Thornton, with a review hearing in 6 months to determine permanent placement. Mr. Thornton, you will be monitored by the court during this period. Any sign that you cannot properly care for these children, and they will be removed." "I understand, Your Honor. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into the conditions at the Bitter Creek Orphan Asylum. Mrs. Hendricks, you're suspended from your duties pending the outcome of that investigation. The county will appoint a temporary administrator." Mrs. Hendricks looked like she might faint. "Your Honor, you can't." "I can and I have. These proceedings are concluded." The gavel came down with a sound like a thunderclap. For a moment no one moved. Then Lily and Rose were running to Thornton, throwing themselves into his arms, crying and laughing at the same time. He caught them, held them, his own eyes wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "We can stay?" Rose asked through her tears. "Really stay? Really stay? You're mine now. My daughters. Forever. Forever." Around them the courtroom erupted in noise, some angry, some celebrating, all talking at once. But Thornton heard none of it. He heard only the sound of his daughter's laughter, felt only the weight of their small arms around his neck, knew only the overwhelming certainty that this was what he'd been waiting for. This was his life starting again. The ride back to the ranch was joyful chaos. The girls chattered non-stop, their earlier fear replaced by giddy relief. They pointed out landmarks, made plans for the spring, asked if they could have a dog, could they learn to ride horses, could they plant a garden, could they? Thornton answered yes to all of it, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. When they arrived home, Mrs. Chen was waiting on the porch, her face creased in a rare smile. "Well? We won," Thornton said simply. Mrs. Chen nodded, satisfied. "Good. I made a celebration dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. The girls ran inside, already planning where to put their new things, what to do with their room, how to rearrange the furniture. Their voices echoed through the house, chasing away the last of the silence that had reigned for 5 years. Thornton stood on the porch for a moment, looking out at his ranch, his home. The same view he'd seen for years, but everything was different now. The emptiness had been filled. The silence had been broken. The house was alive again. "You coming, Papa?" Lily called from inside. "Mrs. Chin says dinner's getting cold." "Papa." He'd never get tired of hearing that. "Coming?" he called back. But he paused for one more moment, looking up at the winter sky. Somewhere up there, if the stories were true, if miracles were real, Sarah and Emma were watching. He liked to think they were happy for him. That they understood he wasn't replacing them, just making room in his heart for more love. "Thank you," he whispered to them, to God, to Santa Claus, to whatever force had brought 2 desperate children to his door on Christmas morning. "Thank you for saving me." Then he went inside to his family. 1 year later, Christmas morning. The Thornton ranch looked entirely different than it had the previous year. The corrals were full of horses again. Thornton had started rebuilding his herd. The bunkhouse showed signs of life. He'd hired back several ranch hands to help with the expanding operation. The house itself glowed with light and warmth, decorated with wreaths and garlands the girls had made, a massive Christmas tree visible through the front window. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. Lily and Rose, now 8 years old and unmistakably healthy, were helping Mrs. Chin prepare Christmas breakfast. Flour covered every surface. The girls wore matching aprons, gifts from Mrs. Chin, and had sticky dough on their hands and faces. "Papa," Lily called. "Come see what we made." Thornton entered the kitchen, his hair still mussed from sleep, wearing the wool socks the girls had knitted for him. They were lumpy and uneven, but he wore them constantly. On the counter sat a tray of cookies shaped like stars and trees, decorated with colored sugar. "We made them all by ourselves," Rose said proudly. "Well, Mrs. Chin helped a little." "A little," Mrs. Chin muttered, but she was smiling. "They're beautiful," Thornton said, and meant it. Not because they were perfect, they weren't, but because his daughters had made them. After breakfast, they opened presents. The girls had saved their allowances for months to buy Thornton a new hat. He'd worn his old one to threads. He gave them books, new dresses, and as the final present, 2 young horses, gentle mares perfect for children learning to ride. "Really?" Lily breathed, reading the note that had been attached to the deed papers. "We each get our own horse? Really? You've been taking riding lessons for months. It's time you had your own mounts." The girls shrieked and hugged him, then ran for the door to see their horses. Thornton followed more slowly, watched them race to the barn where the mares were stabled, listened to their delighted laughter. Marshall Cooper rode up mid-morning, dismounting with a grin. "Merry Christmas, Thornton family." "Marshall." The girls ran to greet him. Cooper had become a regular visitor, often joining them for dinner. "I brought news," he said. "Thought you'd want to know. The investigation into the orphanage is complete. Mrs. Hendricks has been charged with child endangerment and abuse. She'll face trial in the spring." "And the children?" Thornton asked. "The county hired a new administrator, a woman named Helen Foster from back east. She's reformed the whole place. Better food, better conditions, no more cellar punishments. Several families have come forward to adopt. Tommy, you remember Tommy, the 4-year-old? Got adopted by the Hendersons. Can you believe it? The same Henderson who turned the girls away last year had a change of heart." "People can change," Thornton said, glancing at his daughters. "I'm proof of that." "That you are." Cooper smiled. "The girls look wonderful, by the way. Happy. Healthy. You've done good, James." They did the hard part. They took a chance on a broken-down hermit. After Cooper left, the family settled in the great room. A fire crackled in the hearth. The Christmas tree stood tall in the corner, its branches decorated with paper chains and popcorn strings the girls had made. The portrait of Sarah and Emma hung in its place of honor, joined now by a new photograph. Thornton with Lily and Rose, all 3 smiling, taken just last month in town. Rose noticed Thornton looking at it and came to stand beside him. "Do you still miss them? Emma and your wife?" "Every day," Thornton said honestly. "But missing them doesn't mean I'm sad all the time anymore. I can remember the good times and smile instead of just hurting. Because you have us now? Because I have you now. And because I learned that love doesn't run out. Having you in my life doesn't mean I love them less. It means my heart grew bigger." Lily joined them, studying both portraits. "We're like 2 families that became one family." "Exactly like that." Rose pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper worn soft with age. The letter to Santa. Thornton had kept it on the mantel all year. "Do you think Santa knew?" Rose asked. "When we wrote this, do you think he knew you were what we needed and we were what you needed?" Thornton looked at the letter, at the simple wish it contained, at the miracle it had brought into his life. "I think Santa works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he brings toys and candy. Sometimes he brings exactly what people need, even if they didn't know they needed it. So he brought us a papa and brought you daughters? Something like that." Lily settled onto the floor near the fire, pulling out a book. "Papa, will you read to us?" It was a request they made often now, as if making up for years of bedtime stories they'd never had. Thornton settled into his chair, no longer the chair of a lonely hermit, but the chair of a father, and opened the book. But before he could start reading, Rose interrupted. "Wait. We have something for you too." The girls exchanged glances, then Rose pulled out a folded paper. "We wrote a new letter," she said shyly. We thought Santa should know we got what we asked for. So he knows it worked." Thornton took the paper. In their improved handwriting, they'd been practicing diligently, they'd written, "Dear Santa, it's us again, Lily and Rose. Remember we wrote you last year asking for a family? We wanted to tell you thank you. You gave us the best papa in the whole world. He feeds us and keeps us warm and never locks us in cellars and tells us stories and lets us ride horses and makes us laugh. We're not afraid anymore. We're happy. We have a real home now. A forever home. Thank you for hearing our wish. Thank you for bringing us to Papa's door. Thank you for making Christmas magic real. Love, Lily and Rose Thornton. P.S. We have a last name now. Isn't that wonderful?" Thornton's vision blurred. He read it again, then folded it carefully and set it on the mantel next to the original letter. "That's perfect," he said, his voice rough. "Absolutely perfect. Do you want to add something?" Lily asked. "A thank you from you too?" Thornton thought about it, then pulled out a pencil. At the bottom of the girl's letter, he wrote in his own strong hand, "Dear Santa, thank you for reminding me that broken hearts can heal. Thank you for showing me that grief doesn't have to be the end of love. Thank you for 2 daughters who saved my life by letting me save theirs. Merry Christmas. James Thornton." He put the letter back on the mantel, right in the center where everyone could see it. 2 letters, 1 year apart. The first full of desperate hope, the second full of grateful joy. "Now," he said, settling back into his chair, "where were we?" Yes. Chapter 1. As he read, his daughters curled up on either side of his chair, the fire warm on their faces, the house filled with the sound of his voice. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent and perfect. Inside, 3 hearts beat in contentment. A year ago this house had been a tomb. Now it was gloriously, messily, wonderfully alive. Filled with laughter and arguments and sticky fingerprints and scattered toys and 1,000 small chaos of family life. Filled with love. Sometimes miracles came wrapped in expensive paper with elaborate bows. Sometimes they came disguised as tragedy or hardship. And sometimes, just sometimes, they came in the form of 2 desperate children knocking on the right door at exactly the right time, carrying nothing but hope and a letter to Santa. James Thornton had spent 5 years dead inside, going through the motions of living. Then 2 little girls reminded him what it meant to be alive. Reminded him that hearts could break and still heal. That love could be lost and still be found again. That family wasn't just about blood, it was about choice and commitment, and showing up every day to do the hard, beautiful work of caring for each other. As the afternoon wore on, the girls fell asleep against his chair, worn out from excitement and happiness. Thornton stopped reading and just sat there watching them sleep, marveling at how much could change in a single year. Last Christmas he'd been alone. This Christmas he had everything that mattered. Mrs. Chin peeked in from the kitchen, saw the peaceful scene and smiled. "Dinner in an hour," she whispered. Thornton nodded his thanks. He didn't want to move, didn't want to disturb this perfect moment. So he sat in his chair with his sleeping daughters nearby, the fire crackling, snow falling outside, and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 long years. Complete. Home. The letter to Santa had asked for a family. It had delivered so much more than that. It had delivered healing. Hope. A second chance at life and love. And wasn't that the greatest Christmas miracle of all? As if in answer, Rose stirred in her sleep and murmured, "Love you, Papa." "Love you too, sweetheart," Thornton whispered back. "Love you both. Always and forever." Outside, the wind carried the snow in gentle swirls. Inside, the Thornton family, broken pieces that had somehow fit together into something beautiful and whole, celebrated their second Christmas together, and the promise of many more to come. The letter to Santa sat on the mantel, It's simple wish granted beyond measure. Because sometimes, when you're brave enough to ask for what you truly need, when you're desperate enough to risk everything for a chance at something better, when you knock on the right door at exactly the right time, magic happens. Real magic. The kind that changes everything. The kind that saves lives. The kind that turns a lonely ranch into a home, a broken man into a father, two frightened children into beloved daughters. The kind that proves beyond any doubt that miracles are real, that hope is never wasted, that love, real, true, transformative love, can heal even the deepest wounds. All it takes is courage, faith, and someone willing to open the door. Merry Christmas to the Thornton family. Merry Christmas to all those brave enough to believe in second chances. Merry Christmas to anyone who's ever knocked on a door, written a letter, or wished on a star. Magic is real. And sometimes it looks exactly like this.